Hello, everybody. Now, today's area for discussion is the topic of anti Semitism, prejudice and hatred towards Jewish people, which is one of the longest lasting and most destructive of all prejudices in human history. And despite what happened during the Second World War, it hasn't gone away. People still believe that the Jews are behind some kind of conspiracy to take over the world. So let's have a look at anti-Semitism. Definition, first of all: hostility or discrimination against Jews as a religious, ethnic or racial group. So sometimes Jews have been attacked for their religion, sometimes as a race that threatens other races. It goes back a long way, and one of the religious groups who have persecuted the Jews more than any others is in fact the Christian churches. This is Robert Runcie, who was Archbishop of Canterbury, head of the Church of England in the 1980s. And he said, without centuries of Christian anti-Semitism, Hitler's passionate hatred would never have been so fervently echoed. So he's saying that in great sadness. What he is saying is, for centuries, Christians, both Protestants like himself and Catholics, have engaged from time to time in anti-Semitism and have used arguments that were later a justification for Hitler to take anti-Semitism onto an even more awful level with the mass murder of the Jews in the Second World War. The reason, ultimately, is that the Jews were blamed for the death of Jesus Christ. That Jesus himself was a Jew. Crucifixion was not a Jewish punishment, it was a punishment of the Roman Empire. And although the Bible does seem to suggest that some Jewish people wanted Jesus to die, that is not the Jewish people, that is some Jewish people. And there is nothing that Jesus said in the Bible that justified the persecution of his own people, because he was himself a Jew. So that is pretty ridiculous. And that's the thing about anti-Semitism. It's evil, but it's also incredibly stupid. And people believe in all kinds of nonsense. So in the Christian Middle Ages, the Jews are to blame. So what are the Jews to blame for? Well, anything that goes wrong is the fault of the Jews. It was believed that they kidnapped Christian children, and sometimes they would crucify them as if they were Christ, or sometimes drain blood away from them so they could use the blood in their ritual meals, which is complete and utter nonsense, because the Jewish faith actually says you can't use blood, that the blood must not be used in terms of in terms of ritual meals or whatever. So it's actually complete and utter nonsense, and there's no evidence that any of this really happened. It was just inside the fantasies of some people that Jews did this. They were also blamed for the Black Death, a terrible disease which killed millions of people in the 14th century. It was said that the Jews poisoned the drinking wells so that the Christians died from the Black Death, and they did not die, which again, of course, is complete and utter nonsense. It's like blaming the Jews for COVID-19. Can you think of anything more ridiculous than that? They're in league with the devil, some people said. And sometimes there were pictures of a Jewish person with the horns of the devil coming out of his head. Now, all of this was, as the Reverend Runcie said, the fault of Christians. Christians presented this image of Jews as being evil. Also, Judas Iscariot, the man who betrayed Jesus, was presented as the archetypal Jew. So all of that was put into the whole set of ideas about why you should hate Jews. And therefore, In the 20th century, Hitler used that as a justification for the Nazi hatred of the Jews. The personification of the devil as the symbol of all evil assumes the living shape of the Jew. So Christian anti-Semitism had an effect upon Nazi anti-Semitism. Hitler blamed the Jews for everything. Germany losing the First World War, the Great Depression, all of Germany's problems, his own personal problems. He had a conspiracy theory that the Jews were behind a takeover of the world. They were behind the American capitalists. They were behind the Russian communists. They were responsible for everything that went wrong. The conspiracy theory. This led, of course, to the persecution and to the mass murder of millions of Jews. These are some of those who are going to be sent to the gas chambers. And you've got men, women, even little children. They are going to die for no reason. And that Hitler and the Nazis have this unbelievably stupid idea that the Jews are behind this great conspiracy to run the world and to do Germany down. And there is not a shred of evidence for that. It is quite unbelievable that so much human suffering can be based not just on cruel intentions, but on plain and utter stupidity, on ideas which are nonsense, claims which have no basis in fact whatsoever. It's quite awful. So you would have thought that anti-Semitism would have died away after the end of the Second World War. No, it hasn't. Still today, there are many, many people throughout the world. Some are Christians, some are Muslims, but who believe that there is a Jewish conspiracy. There you've got the Star of David, and there you've got, again, that racist image of the Jew, and you can see a shadow in the background. The Jews are about to take over the world. Just over 100 years ago, there was a document called the Protocol of the Elders of Zion, which was supposed to be proof that the Jews were trying to take over the world. It was a forgery. It was shown to be a forgery, and yet people like Hitler still believed in it, even though it had been proved to be a crude forgery. "9/11 was blamed by some people on the State of Israel and on the Jews. Now, it's just unbelievable that people can actually accept these ridiculous conspiracy theories. If you're gonna find out a conspiracy, you have to find evidence to back it up. There was no evidence for any of these conspiracies throughout history. There was no evidence that the Jews kidnapped Christian children. The whole idea of the devil was made up. Hitler's obsession with the Jews were completely nonsensical. They made no rational sense whatsoever. And the conspiracy theories today with 9/11 are the same kind of thing. They just don't make any sense. So we finish off with a quotation. Neil deGrasse Tyson is an American scientist. He's an astronomer. And this is his quotation, which I think is really, really good to understand about conspiracy theories. A conspiracy theorist is a person who tacitly admits that they have insufficient data to prove their point. A conspiracy is a battle cry of a person with insufficient data. So when you challenge a conspiracy theorist, according to Neil deGrasse Tyson, you will come up against no evidence. But because there's no evidence, they will scream out the conspiracy as loudly as they can. Now that is very sad, but it's also extremely dangerous and extremely menacing, because again and again, one group of people are continually picked on and blamed for things that go wrong that have nothing to do with them at all. Whether it's the death of Jesus Christ, the mutilation of Christian children, personification of the devil and the defeat of Germany in war, or 9/11, it's got nothing to do with the Jews. Evidence, facts to back up their case, these people do not have. There is no basis in reality. Thank you very much.